Okay, the recording has started and a transcription is being taken of the lesson. So welcome this afternoon to part 5. This is also the final part of this task. I will post out the next task into the general channel for you, which is task 4. It's already in the phase 1 channel, so it can already be accessed. Just turning on my camera. Here we go. Seem to have lost that about 10 minutes ago. No idea why. So let's have a look through. So today what we're going to start to do is look at how we develop from those tests, then into your outcome and reviewing. Okay, so we will run through where we were so far. Here we go. Has anybody been doing any tests since Thursday? Because they were good fun. And the idea is we were taking our own photos, weren't we? So some people might still be on that. Has anybody taken any new photos since Thursday? So let's just go through these. So learning. Oh, you have. Brilliant. Pleased with the new photos? They're good fun to set up, aren't they? So our learning objectives, tips, all of this is taken from the assignment sheet. Obviously the lessons then give you more detail. You think so, you're pleased with them, great. So we looked at a brief history of Paul Cézanne, his work, his links, and then part 1A was to start doing some of your own research. Always make sure nothing is copied from the internet and any sources are acknowledged. Then we looked at context and concept, and then analysis. So again, any of those stages, the context, the concept, the analysis, you can use these formats again when you come to phase 2 to do your artist influence section. And then we started to initially start with his work, take sections from his work and recreate them. So you're getting a feel for his style and you're also getting a feel for the media that you want to use. So there are some examples there. So I've clearly identified to the examiner what I've been looking at, the section I've chosen, and then the piece that I've produced. And always show, if the text wasn't here on the left-hand side here, I would have shown this image large on one side. Always show your artwork larger than the source image, because that again is another clue that it's your work and not theirs. So some examples here, and this is important because you really want to get the feel and the style of Cézanne, how you're going to use it in your work, okay? And then annotate your test and experiments. Let us know what you've been learning through that, what you've noticed, what you tried, what media you've been testing. And then the contact sheets of your own photos. Now you could, as we said last lesson, use task 8, but I think you'll probably be more interested in creating new photos. And this was all explained in the last recording. So part 4, have a look at that. So we're aiming for our own still life. So don't forget, new photos means do a new risk assessment. So there's guidance here. If you want more guidance, have a look at the video for the additional task 2, which is all about risk assessment, and put it into a table. So you can see there I produced my new Cézanne style photos, really just trying to get as close as I can to his style. I couldn't find things with a lot of colour, but we know that we can change the colour when we get onto the drawing. So I can adjust that when I'm looking at it for the tests and the final outcome. So that should then give you plenty of range to then take your own sections of from your own photos, but put them into Cézanne's style. So some of those are underway. Last lesson, and I'll show you again what I did, is the tangerines I decided to turn into apples. And I'm going to stick with that because I think they are a lot more interesting and they are more similar to Cézanne than keeping them as oranges. So feel free to push that creativity, push that further to suit that style. Okay. Has anybody, so somebody's taken photos. Has anybody tried some of these tests as well? Because that's what these photos are for, to then start to, what we're starting to do is make something unique of our own. We're not just going to end up doing a straight copy from Cézanne. We've got our photos, we're pushing it on further. The photos will be our starting point, which then obviously we can push forward when we come to add colour and surfaces. Has anybody had a go at any tests yet? Even maybe if you've done the Cézanne tests, has anybody had a go at the Cézanne tests? They're really fun. I hope you enjoy them. Hoping to do some later on. Yeah, they should be really enjoyable. I certainly enjoy them. So this is probably where we're at the moment. Obviously, I want to show you where this heads to because obviously it's the final part. So once you've got those tests, again, you've then got your Cézanne tests, you've got your own tests from your photos that have got the Cézanne influence. You should then be ready to start final outcome. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. So step 4C from last lesson, annotate your tests and experiments. We never need lots of writing, but it's always good to show what you're understanding, what your thoughts are, whether you like it or not, whether you'll use it again, whether you'll develop things further, and really what's happening. So final composition, this is the part today. So I'll post these on as we go through. So step 5A, final composition. So it says, first of all, consider which composition of your own you will work from. This could be one of your photos or combined of more than one of your photos. Do you remember last lesson we talked about if there was maybe an item that was in the other photos, but not the one you'd chosen, you could creatively add it in, as long as obviously you're getting the scale and proportion right. You can also not add things in. So say if, for example, I didn't want the grey jar in this composition, then when I draw it, I just won't draw the grey jar in. So there's still room for manoeuvre, okay? But it could be that you're kind of putting two of your photos together because you want to add a little bit more to that composition. So once you've decided which image it might be, now the other thing is to bear in mind, even though, say that you did your test from one of your photos or more photos, it's up to you. You don't have to stick with that same photo for the outcome. By then you might think, well, actually, I've done the test and I know what I'm going to do with the fruit and I know what I'm going to do with the grey jar, but I'm actually going to use one of the other photos that have those three things because actually they're better suited. So that's fine. So once you've got your photo, you can start to do a couple of simple things just to check if you've got the composition how you want it. So the first thing is you could apply what we call the rule of thirds. So rule of thirds are always a 3x3 segments. They might end up as rectangles. Obviously, if you're working from more of a landscape photo where it's landscape way round rather than portrait, that makes, so that's landscape. Oh, it's not going to pick that up. Landscape, it's going to make me disappear. And then portrait. If it's more like a square like I've got here, you'll end up with 3x3 squares. Now what they say with the rule of thirds is where you have a line, they are strong areas to have items, or like here where they cross, they're called a crash point. So you can see on there, I've made out that rule of thirds, that 3 by 3, and then I've moved it so that that line is bang on that grey jar, and along with the crash point right in the middle of the jar. So you can see I've ended up at the top here and the bottom with some spare photo space. So what do you think that would tell me? Why would it help to put that 3 by 3 grid on? And it's always a 3 by 3 grid for rule of thirds. I could have stretched it. I could have maybe stretched it down the image, but I wanted it more compact. Yeah, what it's telling me is, looking inside the grid, I'm really happy with that composition. I don't actually need this space down the bottom, and I don't need the space at the top, like in the original photo. So sometimes it just helps you to maybe visualize the section that you want. There's even a tiny slither off either side that I don't need. So you can easily do that just to see if you can push that composition on further, making it stronger. Okay, so I've got it down to this section here, and I think, well, give me a thumbs up or a smiley face in the chat if you think the gridded version, where it's more compact and I've got rid of the top and the bottom, would you say that is stronger than maybe the one on the left that leaves all of the bottom and the top in? Give me a thumbs up or a smiley face if you think the rule of thirds version is a stronger composition, because I feel it directs you more, doesn't it? Yeah. I haven't taken it directly to the top of the lid of the grey. I think that would feel a bit squashed, wouldn't it? But I've certainly cropped it in. All I did was I inserted a table 3 by 3, and then I had it on transparent with red lines, and I laid that over the top to see what it looked like. So that's a really good thing you can try with your photos. So I've narrowed it down now. There we go. And again, narrowed it down. Looks good, doesn't it? Much stronger. So always have a play with the photos and just see if that helps. So I've got this lined up here with my grey jar, because that's quite a prominent part. You won't get everything lined up. And I've got, look, a crash point there right on a tangerine. So that's good. Okay. So it does say, don't forget, remember to adjust your colours to suit more Cézanne style in your tests and experiments. Ideally, you do not want it to be a straight copy of the photo colours, because if I did a straight copy of those colours in the photo, it wouldn't look like Cézanne at all. There would be a little resemblance in the items, but you'd only know that really if you knew Cézanne. So like we did on our tests from our photos, you start to apply the Cézanne style. And that's where all of your tests so far will help you, okay? So it says, remember what you observed when researching the Cézanne style. So you look back at all of your tests and bring them forward to help you with this stage, okay? So the photo has given me my layout. I know the layout and the positioning of my items, okay? So I wanted to then just show you the marking criteria. This is the sheet. It's one of many that the examiner will look at. And this is where this task actually fits in. So 1.1, it's saying develop and integrate their practical skills and technical understanding within their chosen area within the requirements of the brief. So the brief is obviously the task 10 Paul Cézanne. You're with your test and experiment showing your practical skills. Your notes are telling us your understanding. Okay, so obviously other tasks also tick this box, but it's showing you how it all fits in. It will also cover looking at develop ideas from personal research. The personal research will be what? What personal research have we got in this project? There's two elements. Where could we show our personal research for this task? Brilliant. In the research that we did at the start. And what other thing have we researched? But we've done it in a photography format. We researched his life, yeah. But we also took our own photos, didn't we? Yeah. The experiments come into it as well, because it says within the potential and limitations of selected media and materials. But our photos, exactly, setting up still life, thank you. Our photos are part of the research. We've made them a research source, haven't we? So we've taken them and we can work from them as well. We can test our media from those setups once we get them into tests and experiments and then into final outcome. So you can see, I mean, for most tasks, there's really not loads of marks for final pieces. It's all about how you get there and that testing, the experimenting, showing what's happening. We've then got produce a body of work that satisfies the brief. So obviously this task as a whole is hopefully satisfying the brief of task 10 as an assignment, in that you've researched Paul Cézanne, you've looked at his style, you've implemented his style, you've produced something unique. And then produce a final evaluation on media, materials and outcome. So you'll notice most tasks I'll get you to talk about the media, the materials, the outcomes, what you've actually done. It's not just about whether you like the outcome or not. It's actually about how did the media, how did the materials work? How did it turn out? So this is why I get these built into our live lessons, so that when that examiner comes to look at these sheets, there is plenty of scope for us ticking those off. We've done them. Okay. And then collectively, once you've got all of your 17 tasks together, there is a section on the phase 1 channel at the end of your 17th task. You then put it all together and it's called your phase 1 skills builder review. We see all of those tasks put together in numerical order and we look at it as a whole portfolio. So don't forget to do that once you've come to the end of your 17th task on phase 1. It needs to be reviewed as a whole before you then start phase 2. Okay, so it's interesting to see how what we're doing connects to what the exam board are looking for. Okay, has anybody got any questions, no matter how big or small they think it is? And again, this is just one of the sheets that they are looking at. Okay, but again, if you're following the lessons and you're following what I'm setting, you'll cover these. You won't need to really worry about these sheets. You'll be covering it already. Okay. So final piece composition. Things to remember. Oh, a question. When the work goes in for marking, does the marker look at this too? Yeah, good point, actually. So when you submit for your final, what we call entry June, because that's the examiner only comes in June, everything on the course is looked at. So you'll end up with 3 files. You'll have your phase 1 skills builder portfolio, which is all 17 tasks put together as one PowerPoint document. That's why we advise PowerPoint, because when you have to then put them together, it's a lot easier to copy and paste the slides across into one document. Okay. Second document you'll have is your phase 2 final theme project, and your third portfolio will be your 3 additional safety tasks. Okay. Somebody else then said, no, I mean the OCAD teacher. Yes, we look at everything. Don't forget, the course is not graded. The exam board on their certificate will only give a pass or a fail. Okay. Now we give you scores in your individual tasks and your phase 1 review, so that you have an understanding of where you're at. If you're scoring just a 50 each time, which is just a pass, you'll probably find when we do your review, there might be things that still need a little bit more coverage when you get to phase 2. If you're hitting sort of 70s, 75, you're doing really well. And that will put you in good stead. So it should end up that you've got a good, strong phase 1 portfolio. So when you come to phase 2, you haven't got the extra stress of, oh, I forgot to talk about visual language in my phase 1 and I didn't do very many tests. You've done it all, you've got it solid. Okay, so it's really important. Phase 1 is ever so important. Okay. So that's why we give you grades, but they're not given to the exam board. The exam board don't work with grades. They look on the assignment sheet, on the grading sheet, like the example I've just showed you, and they're looking for those passes. Okay. Someone said, oh, is it okay to amalgamate bits from different photos for final quiz? Yes, it is. Just be aware that, yeah, you might have an item that was only in one photo and the other photo doesn't have it in, and that's the one you want to use. Yes, you can creatively sketch that in, just making sure scale and proportions are correct against the other objects that are in the setup. But yes, that's fine. Okay. So does that help with the marking that somebody's just asked about? So we say that a 50 is a pass, but obviously it's just there. Okay. So you know that if you're just hitting those 50s, you're probably maybe not expanding as much as we would like to. So maybe you're not doing tests and experiments, or they're very limited, or you're not talking about visual language. Yeah, so get that good, strong phase 1 in. That puts you in good stead for phase 2. Okay. So this is where, again, remembering things. We did grid method when we did task 1, observation. We also looked at scaling up. And again, we talk about, I'll come to that question in a second. We talk about how we can enlarge, because again, the photo that you're working from, and I've printed mine out this afternoon, but you might want to work larger than that. So you want to be able to scale it up correctly, so it's not all out of proportion. Okay. So what I've done is I've actually printed off a different photo today, and it's larger, so these measurements aren't correct, but I've written them down on my sheet. So basically, you just need to know how big the piece of paper is that you're going to work on. So I've chosen to work on A3. If I times my photo by 2, it actually doesn't fit on A3 paper. So I had to scale it down a little bit. So I'll explain it when I go over to the overhead camera. Okay. Yeah, how can a no-CAD student talk about an A star? Again, the exam board don't award the grades. It's just they give a pass or a fail, and what we are equivalent to. Okay. But if you're scoring high, then you're obviously equivalent to roughly in grades, but we just give you a score so you know your own progress. Okay, super. So I'll run through these slides, and again, you can always chat to us in the private chat if you want a little bit more information, but they only give a pass or a fail on their criteria. Okay. So using the grid method, so I've got the grid on my sheet, which I printed off, and I've used 4x4. You can put as much of a grid on your photo as you want. You've just got to make sure if you put a grid on the photo, it's got to be the same size grid on the drawing. You can't have a 6x6 grid on your photo and then a 4x4 grid on your piece of paper, because all your squares will be out. Okay, and I'm going to show this when I go to the overhead camera, so no worries. So remember that scaling up, ratio and proportion, you've basically got to make sure that when you take your original size of the photo, the image that you're working from, that you times the height and the width by the same number. Okay, so whether you're timesing it 1.5 times larger, that gives you new sizes, or twice as large, new sizes, 2.5 times larger. So what I did is I measured mine and I then calculated it by 1.5, which fitted on A3 paper, but it was a bit small. So I thought, oh, I wonder if I'll be able to times it by 1.75. And I did, and it managed to stay on the page. So what will determine is how big your piece of paper is. And if it's gone off the page, you need to then reduce your whatever you multiply it by. Okay. If you get stuck, if you give me your measurements of the image in your private chat, I'll show you how to work it out. Okay. But I am going to show you on this one as well. So we did a little bit before we did it in task 4. Oops, let's go back. So you measure your original size and then you times it. So with this one, I've times it by 2. So my new height will be 20 centimeters and my new width will be 20 because the originals were 10. Because we've all done it, haven't we? We've probably done a grid and then we've done a bigger grid on a bigger piece of paper, but it's not quite right. The proportions aren't right. It's because you haven't timesed it by the same number. Some people have stretched it to the larger piece of paper and it's all gone out of sync, or they've stretched what was a square photo and they've stretched it to a rectangular piece of paper. So it's just practice. Once you've done it a few times, you realize why you're doing it and how it actually works. Okay, so grid method. So I've got my 4x4 and 4x4 on both images, so I can help transfer the information across. You don't have to use the grid method, but I put these in to remind people, because you might say, oh, I was really accurate when I did the grid method. Yeah, I will use it again. Okay. And then final piece evaluation. So once you've got your final piece, and this isn't my finished final piece here, you would think about what you've learned about Cézanne. Let me pop this in, 5B. And again, you know why now I'm asking you to evaluate things, because we know that the examiner is looking for them in certain places. Okay. What have you learned about Cézanne, his style? Number 2, compare your final work to his to show the inspiration. So on that same page, you could have your evaluation, you could have your final piece. Make sure your final piece is the largest image, and small in the corner, like here, you could show a Cézanne piece as well. So you can show a visual link of his work and your work, but put his work small because it's your work that needs to be displayed largest. Okay. Number 3, what did you trial and experiment with before taking on the final piece? Number 5, what style and media did you use in the final piece? Explain. So there we go. We're talking about media. Number 5, identify the visual language you used in the final piece. Visual language comes on another sheet, but it fits that visual language. What went well in your final piece? Number 7, what would you change next time? Now, don't take that as a negative, because all of us, we all always think how we would change it next time, don't we? And it doesn't mean that it's gone disastrously wrong. It's just that you've always got a second idea, haven't you? But put it in. You might say, well, actually, now that I've learnt this, I'd probably work larger if I had more time, or I would have changed my photos and put in more fruit. So whatever it might be, what's in your head that you would have if you changed it next time? And number 8, how did studying a master and learning from them help you to produce your final piece? So again, you might never have heard of Cézanne 3 weeks ago, and now you really love his work, or you maybe knew a little bit, but you'd never tried it. So again, how did studying from him help you to produce your final piece? Okay. So that takes us to the end of those. So we can now go to the overhead camera and we'll have a look at those stages and developing our final piece. So this is where we are. Okay, so while I switch over, let me know if there are any questions that you have. I'm just going to pop the light on because it seems to have gone dark this afternoon. See if that helps. And we'll have a visual run through of those tests that we have done so far, just separating them out. And again, it's these tests that you want to have with you when you're doing your outcome, because they are all helping you take this outcome into that Cézanne idea. Okay. Right. So switching over. Yes, adjusting the camera. There we go. So the first lot of tests you see here, and again, if it's gone small on your screen, somebody kindly pointed out last week, if you go across the top icons on your Teams page and you click on the view that's got 4 little boxes and you click on speaker, that should bring this camera up larger for you. Okay, thank you. So looking back, these are the tests that I did taken from Cézanne's work. Okay, they helped to inform the tests that I did when I worked from my own photos, because my own photos didn't have the Cézanne colour. Oh, these look lovely, don't they, all laid next to one another? Never fit it all in though on the screen. So we've got those. So it's 3 to 5 tests. There we go. So I've got my soft pastels, oil pastels, and I've just got one in acrylic as well. So you should be ending up with something similar. Again, you can see that they're not all quite finished. I'm just taking the bits I really want to concentrate on. You'll start to notice some favourites that you really like. And these will help me. These helped me last lesson. If you remember, my photo had the oranges in. I move these out of the way. But I wanted to change my tangerines. I wanted to change them into apples. So that was my original from my photo, this one. This is Cézanne's work. This is my photo, or copy from his. And if you remember, I redrew it. I redrew these tangerines, but I turned them into apples. I love the apple. And I managed to look at the apple from Cézanne's test, when I copied from Cézanne, to give me my apple. So the tests help you with the next stage, you see. So I'm going to also be keeping my eye on these while I'm doing my outcome, because I want to make sure that my apples are looking like Cézanne's apples. Okay. So the tests that you take from your photos, they started to have a Cézanne feel about them. So you can see from that original photo, I printed my photo in black and white, but that original grey jar, I took the inspiration from, hopefully you've spotted it, took it from the green bottle. Okay, So that's not a green bottle, but I took my colourways from it. So everything is connecting and helping you get your piece as close to Cézanne as possible. Okay. Now I've done a very mini piece here. I've done a couple of versions, but I'm going to go larger this afternoon. But I wanted to do them just so it gives you an idea of sort of how they're headed. So what will happen is these tests will help you work out your colours. So when you do your final piece, you can then start to bring those tests in to help. So can you see there is my layout? Yeah. And you should be able to spot where I took inspiration from. Does that make sense? What do you think? So if I compare, I know it's in black and white, if I compare my original photo with my colour version, you can see how that's really now gone into Cézanne colours. And look at the background. Remember, it had that cream background, and I was really looking at how he brought in those subtle colours into the background. So it's a very mini one, this one, but I wanted to show you, because again, with time, we don't always get quite to the end, but I wanted to show you how that then fits into coming into your outcome. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up or a smiley face. I did do another version as well. Again, just seeing how those colours come in. But it's transformed those photos, hasn't it? And even there, you know, that was too plain here. I pushed it further in this one. So this one is probably the closest link to the Cézanne, isn't it? Yeah. So on my final slide, I would have my photo. And again, don't forget, crop it down digitally. I haven't used all the paper, but I don't want us to see all the paper. I want to crop it down digitally when I present it into my PowerPoint. I'll put it alongside the evaluation and alongside a mini version of one of Cézanne's works. So I can see it all on one page, so the examiner can see it all on one page and make it easy. Okay, so really visually you've got outcome. Outcome was helped previously by your own photo test. The jar, the oranges, okay, they were helped originally from the Cézanne test I did. There's another one there. So it all links. You can see where everything has come back from or developed from. So we had Cézanne, we had our own versions, we have the outcome. So you can see how it's all helped one step after the other. Okay. Any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to start looking at my outcome for today and do a bit of I've done the measuring already to speed things up. Any questions? Okay. So what I've done is, again, for a visual, I've printed off the photo that I'm going to work from. And this was the one that I cut it down when I applied the rule of thirds. And over the top, I've put a 4x4 grid. You can put more on the grid. It depends how you like to work. Some people don't like it too gridded, or they like it more gridded because it helps them stage by stage. This is an A4 piece of paper. I tend to work A4 on camera because it fits better, but I thought I'll scale this one to A3 just that you can see. So what I did is, first of all, I measured how high this photo is. So it was 15.4, and how wide, it's actually 15.8. So I've written that there. And then I tried to see what size it would give me if I times it by 1.5, or if I times it by 1.75. So the first measurements I did, if I get a highlighter, I thought I would times it by 1.5. So if I did it by 1.5, it gave me 23. And if I did this one by 1.5, it gave me just over 23 as well, which I thought, well, that's okay. But when I looked at my sheet of paper, it would still be quite small on A3. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can get the next size up. I knew that 2 would be too large and it would come off the page. So I thought, okay, if I times 15 by 0.4 by 1.75 this time, almost like 1 3/4, it would give me 26 centimetres. And if I did 15.8 by 1.75, because you've got times it by the same number, it gives me 27 point, I'm going to say 0.6, okay, so 26.9, 27.95. So all I had to do was double check that they would fit inside the page. Page goes up to 30, so I knew that doubling it, I would be off the page. So yeah, 27, the largest, would fit in. Okay, so I then drew out the new sizes, 26.95 or 26.9 and 27.6. So that gave me the new size. That's an A3 piece of paper. Just fold that over. Okay, so that means that I've got that scaled up and in proportion. So the new sizes were 26.9 here. That's the new size there. And 27.6 is my new size here. So I know if I follow each one of those squares and draw what's in it, that will properly scale up my drawing. Okay, I've put the grid on. Now the grid was a 4x4, so again I just divided it up 4x4. I drew it in half first and then half again. That's how I did it. I've done mine quite dark so you can see it on camera, but in real life when you do it, I'd keep your grid quite light because you'll want to be able to rub it out before you put your media on. Don't leave it in because it will show. Okay, are you with me so far? Please ask any questions if I'm going too quickly, or if there's anything you want to recap. So I have my original size times by 1.5 in both, sorry, 1.75 in both directions. I could even times it by 1.8 if I wanted to, just make that extra size. But as long as they're both the same, that will give you then your new sizes. And then the only thing you've got to check is if it will fit on the piece of paper that you want to use. All right. So I can now start to sketch out using the grid method. And also think about what Cézanne said. He said about things going back to their universal forms. When I'm drawing from a grid, I've always in my head got this idea of each one being sort of a scale of 1 to 10 and roughly looking at where things sit and how much of the actual grid they're using. So sketch it out. Just slightly comes into that place there. This is why I did the mini ones as well, because I wanted to show you the scaling up. But I also wanted to show you how the outcomes have changed into that style. So then I've got tangerine, so I've pretty got one sort of central here, and I'm going to turn those into apples. And also from your tests, hopefully what you've decided is which media you want to go with. I'm going to go with my oil pastels because they worked really well for the tests. They really gave me a good Cézanne style, and I like them. So plotting it out. I'm not too worried about any detail at the moment. I just want to try to get them in position and have a look. Because when it's larger, you'll want to just look back, you know, step back for a minute and have a look at them. Because when you're sat at the desk close, so I'll probably stand, you know, put this at arm's length from me just to check my proportions. So then we've got, this one comes round here. And again, feel free to move your paper around if it's easier and more comfortable in your hand. And I'm going to draw the full circle of this. I know it's interrupted by the other piece there, but that will help me to get more of a better circle. See, that just crosses over there. So the grid just helps you to plot. So I can see that grid's coming in there. So maybe the circle needs to come down a bit more. Okay, and I've got my cloth. I can see the point comes down to about here. It crosses over about here and here on that grid. And it comes up. And again, I mark it sometimes on my printout. So you can see where it's touching. It's funny, the jar looks a lot shorter than what I thought it was going to be. It's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes in your mind, you have an idea that maybe one shape, one item is maybe the more dominant one or tallest one. And then when you start sketching and looking at scale and proportion, I think it's maybe the lid just needs working out. I think the lid is too big. Lots of lines on the lid that I'm trying to keep track of. That's better. It's better. Also, what I'm looking for, which helps the other way, is I can see there's an issue here because I went too far over. What I can then look at is what is called the negative space in between the items. So you can see I haven't got much space here. There should be a bigger space really. So that tells me I need to move that over. So I'm just going to take that out again. So looking at the negative space, the fresh air in between items can also help, particularly if you think, I just cannot see, this is a bit dark on here as well, just cannot quite see where the line is. So if I just said, right, what kind of gap is it? It's probably more like this. And it tucks in there. That's better. It's better. So once you have got it sketched out, I'm going to start on these. I'm not ready for it, but you know where we're headed. Then you look back at your tests, your range of tests, and you start to bring the style into the piece with those favourite strong elements that you've been doing throughout the project so far. So your piece should end up unique. It is taken from one of your photos. That makes it unique. And you've applied the Cézanne colourway style to it, which again will make it unique. We are not ending up with a copied Cézanne piece. We don't work like that. That gets us no marks really. So I'm just going to go down here. And I know I need to get that point back to there. So it crosses about here and here, and again here. So I'm just going to freestyle and see if I can get back roughly to there. Okay. So the grid method does help, I think, but again, it's all your own choice how you prefer to work. So you can see I've got that sketched in roughly there. So once you're happy you've got it in place, rub out your grid. Don't leave your grid in because it will show. So I'm just going to start with my jar. And also I've done my outline fairly dark because again, I just wanted to be able to show you it on screen. But don't rub your grid out till you've got everything in. Otherwise you'll be a bit stuck as to where everything has sat. I just need to bring the top of that down a little bit. I need to make that whole. There's always one thing, isn't there, that you just need to keep revisiting. Oh, and I've not put in this part of the pestle and mortar. So what I can do with that, I can see it leans and it just touches there. So I'm going to take the angle, put the angle on my pencil, and I'm going to transfer it over. That is then going to give me the angle, because we often don't exaggerate them enough. So I've got the top here. It's pretty symmetrical. And then it tapers out. So we've got a bit of a top here. And I'm just going to look at roughly how much negative space is left in there once it opens at the bottom there. Something like that, isn't it? There we go. So angles, if you get stuck, put the pencil on the actual angle and transfer it across. Because we often don't, as I say, we don't tend to exaggerate them enough. Then they look too upright. Okay. So I would then start to think, okay, which bits am I going to bring through? Oh wow, look at the time. I thought, oh, it's probably about 1:45. So I've got my test from before, and I'm happy with the jug, but I know, so happy with the colours of the pot, but I know I've still got to work out the background, but I can then start to apply that onto my final piece. So this is why tests are so important, because they really work out, you know, what we're doing. So theoretically, when you get to your final outcome, you should have probably solved everything. There won't be too much left to figure out. Okay. So I'm just working in. And again, I'm remembering how I worked with my tests. I like my oil pastels. I did them in lines. I blocked out the sections. I wasn't blending everything in first straight away. I was just trying to work out where my light colours sit. When you get to this point, there should be not really, unless you're, like somebody said, just bringing in an element from one of the other photos, there shouldn't really be anything that you've not done before on there. So Bringing in more of the olive green. And if I did think on here, oh, actually, I went for the wrong green, or I made it too blue, you can adjust it when you get to this part. Don't stick with things that you don't, you know, at that time you thought, oh, that just went a little bit too dark there. Okay. These greens. Just mapping out where the greens are. And again, if you need to, go back again and go back to its original source, which for this one, I can find it, was the bottle. So have that to the side as well. Be looking at it. If you want, you know, if you think, well, actually, maybe I'll go a little bit bluer with it. But then we're starting to apply that across. Okay. Makes sense. So you can see how all these stages connect now, can't you? So that outcome, if I show you my mini version, there's my mini version. Okay, you can see how that has been developed through those series of tests and experiments. And obviously I'm working larger. I've worked larger because I think this one I did in colour pencil. This one is in oil pastel. I would struggle a little bit if it's oil pastel and it's small. So I just need to work a little bit larger. So that's an A3 piece of paper. I would say that is more than big enough. That's fine. I probably wouldn't go bigger because again, it's time, isn't it? If you're going larger, you're needing to spend more time. And obviously we're on a bit of a time, aren't we, to, you know, get things done. Okay, so just going to go back over to the document there. So again, let's turn off the camera. Should make it larger for you. And so that's what I've just been looking at there, scaling up and into outcome. Okay, super. So I hope that has been useful for you. Any questions, pop them into the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me again this afternoon. I'll post out the new task on the general channel shortly this afternoon. It's task 4 that we're going to have a look at on Thursday. And I look forward to seeing everybody then. Okay, take care, everybody. Cheerio. Bye.